Welcome back to Unraveled Game Thoughts for another rendition of the top 100. This time my number 60 through 41. So the more I do this, the more I'm like, you know what? I know these things are switching around and changing and moving in positions next year when I get around to doing this again. It impresses me how quickly some of these things change over time as I play games or start thinking more about a game. So, but I'm gonna stick with it. I have made my top 100. I'm gonna plow through this year, and I just know that next year it's gonna be a different list. It's gonna be a different order. And we'll see what that looks like then. But beginning with number 60, I have Welcome to, and in putting this one here, I have played Welcome to on I played it kind of in person during COVID. One of my buddies set up a Welcome to game virtually, and we were able to play during the pandemic. I think we played at least one game, maybe more. And then they put it on BGA, and I played there. This is a great game. I have a box of Welcome to the Moon I haven't opened yet, so I am looking forward to playing that. I think it looks really neat. But I really like the simplicity of the flip and write and the writing in a number and just trying to get the best, assemble the best row of houses that you can. I've played Cartographers as well, which is also a flip and write. The thing I think I like about Welcome to, it feels less finicky. I realize they're both flip and writes, but Cartographers to me just feels a little finicky in the symbology on the cards and what you can draw and how the points are scored. It's not bad. It's not a fun game. I just never felt nearly as compelled to pull it out and play it. Welcome to, I sometimes just have a hankering to go play. It's 60 on my list, so it's not like I want to pull it out every day and play it, but it's fun, and it's a great game that I can get the family to play, and I think it's a nice, sleek design for what it is. It's by Benoit Turpin and Anne Heidsieck, it's designed by Benoit Turpin, and Anne Heidsieck did the art. So this is my number 60, Welcome to. Number 59 is a game I played for the first time this year. I probably played it like 20 or 30 times now. All on BGA. And that is Russian Railroads. So from the very first time I played this game, I was like, something's kind of interesting about this game. It's by Helmut Olney, or Oli, and Leonard Ogler, and the art is by Martin Hoffman and Klaus Stefan. It sounds like a train game. There's a little bit of it that feels kind of like a train game because you kind of are building track, but not in the sense of moving it across a map or putting trains down across a map. You just have like a little track icon that moves across there's 3 tracks on your board, and you start with building black track and then gray track, and then I want to say it's brown. I don't usually get beyond the gray for the most part. There's another version called Ultimate Railroads, which is, I think, just basically the souped up Russian Railroads, and I've played that one once. I played Russian Railroads so much I was used to the colors of the tracks for that one, and when I tried Ultimate, I was a little bit confused because the colors are it's a different color coding system for the track, but it's virtually the same game. it's worker placement around a rail building theme. That's sort of the game. And there's a lot of point salad. I mean, the high scores I've seen are between 350 and 400. I haven't played a game good enough to get up that high yet, but there's definitely a sort of a path toward victory that I haven't unlocked yet, but it seems to be fairly similar from one play to the next. So that it makes it tough for me to know, is this going to be one of those games that moves up on my list or down on my list? If I play this and get a little bit more experience at it and kind of able to tap into those high number of points, I can see this, and if I find that there are multiple paths to doing that in a competitive game, then I probably would end up moving this up the list a little bit. So I'm looking forward to playing it several more times and trying to get better at it, to explore some of those different options and how to achieve a higher point score over time. Probably would help if I actually read the rules. I think I have skimmed the rules and I've mostly just played the game over and over again, but I don't know that there's probably some rules that I could probably benefit from just reading the rules. I just hate reading rules on a computer screen. I like to have a physical copy in my hand. I love it. I will read that all day. I probably try to read some rules every day, but I do not like reading rules on a computer screen. I don't like reading books. I like physical books, so I'm kind of weird that way. But it's just every time I try to read a book on a computer screen, it's kind of like, this bugs me. So that's Russian Railroads at number 59. Number 58 is a game also new to me this year, but I've played it several times now. I very much could see this game moving up my list. It is Regicide. And I mean, this is really just a deck of cards that you're using to play a co-op game. I could take a deck of cards and I could play this game or teach it to somebody. And if you have a good enough imagination, you don't even need the art of Regicide to make it work. This is by Paul Abrams, Luke Badger, and Andy Rickdale. Art by somebody named Sketch Goblin, or Sketch Goblin is perhaps a company, I'm not sure. But co-op game, deck of cards, and you're basically like the Jack, Queen, and King are all enemies that you're going to have to defeat. So you got 4 Jacks, 4 Queens, 4 Kings. Jacks do 10 damage, take 20 to kill. Queens do 15 damage, take 30 to kill. And Kings do 20 damage and take 40 to kill. And when you defeat one, they go into your draw deck. If you defeat them with the perfect amount of damage, spot on, just what's needed to kill them, they'll go on the top of your draw deck. So that's the next card you draw. If you defeat them just normally it's not perfect damage, they go on your discard pile actually first, and then they get shuffled back into your draw when you add cards back to your draw. So each suit is a special power. One suit will add cards from your discard back to your draw deck. One suit, that's the hearts that does that. The diamonds will let you draw cards. So whenever a diamond is played, you get to do that. When the clubs do double damage, so I play a 9 of clubs, that's going to do 18 damage to my enemy. And spades will take away from the damage the enemy will do to you. So I play a 5 of spades, then I'm playing it on a jack, then the jack's 10 damage will be halved to 5 unless it was already halved previously, and it'll just stay at 5 until we defeat that jack, or unless somebody else plays another spade and then lowers it even further. So it's now the tricky part of Regicide, and what is kind of adds some variability to the gameplay, is at different player counts you may or may not get to use what constitutes a joker called a jester in this particular game. And the jester at, I think you get 1 at 3 players in the deck and 2 at 4 players in the deck, kind of lets me, I won't take damage and I get to pick who goes next. So generally I probably play the jester, because I don't have a card that can either defeat or avoid enough damage for us to end up losing if I get hit. And so I might play the Jester, and then I might go look for one of my companions who has more cards in their hand. Now, I don't know what cards they have, so it could be a bad set of cards, but the more cards they have in hand, the better off they're going to be able to handle the situation. So kind of a way of avoiding that and passing to a player who's better equipped. The other thing that each suit does when it's on the enemies is that you can't use that suit. So if the King of Hearts is out, we can't play cards. We can play heart cards, but they will not gain us cards back. If it's like the Queen of Spades, we can play a spade. It still does damage, but it will not take away, like the power to reduce her hits is not there. It will not work on a Queen of Spades. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic. Aces also play an interesting role as they are spirit animals, and you can play a spirit animal with any other card, and then you get both suit powers plus the ace counts as one in addition to whatever number you're playing. So I play a 5 of spades and I play an ace of diamonds. We're going to get 6 total hit on the enemy. We're going to get the draw cards, and we're going to get to reduce the power of the enemy, assuming that the enemy is not a spade or a diamond. So a lot of little interesting things there. There's also a little dynamic where if your cards are under, if the combined value of 2 equal number cards will be under 10, then you can play 2 cards together. So like 2 4s, 2 3s, 2 2s. You can play them together. You combine the numbers and again combine the powers of the suit. But it's difficult. It's challenging. Some games feel a little bit more lucky than others, but it feels like there's like a path to victory in a lot of games. It's just hard to find because you don't know what your opponent's, not your opponent, you don't know what your colleagues' cards are. And so you're kind of playing a gamble of doing the best you can without, revealing your hand and trying to defeat all these enemies in the order, all the jacks, all the queens, and then all the kings. So that is Regicide, number 58. Number 57, this is one I kind of feel like most likely will end up moving down a little bit, but I struggle with it because I really do like the game and I want to play it more. It's not the kind of game I play and I'm like, I don't want to play that. It's just hard because it's the learning curve is a little bit steep potentially. And that is Imperial Steam by Alexander Humer, art by Andreas Resch. And this is an action selection rail style game, and the mechanisms they're a little stiff, is the way I describe it. It can be pretty punishing if you don't know what you're doing. And I don't know how many options there really are as far as like paths to victory. I haven't played it enough to explore all those. I do enjoy the tension of trying to create the rail and manage the limited resources and build up some kind of an economy in the game. But it is challenging, and there are games where if a player just done what they're doing and they make a wrong move in the first couple of turns, you're out of the game. Like you might as well just restart the game because the other player's going to run away with it. So there's potential for a limited catch-up mechanism given certain plays, depending on what you do. But it is enjoyable, and there are some interesting dynamics in the game that I would be curious to explore more. For instance, there's one rail, if you build it, it's called the Semmering token, and you get to double your last income. And I'd just be curious to play, if you go after that, does that kind of negate how valuable that income is, or is that a harder to build rail than I don't know. It seems like it's overpowered, but I haven't played a game yet that would prove that to be true. I can't remember if somebody got it. I think I got it the last game I played, but it wasn't, there were other things that happened in that game that would not have led me to know whether it was overpowered or not. So, but the Imperial Steam, interesting game, want to explore it more. That's my number 57. Number 56 is a game I played last year at BGG Con. for the first time, and I kind of had a meh experience. I shouldn't say experience. I enjoyed the game, and I think the way in which I evaluate games it's been influenced and changed a little bit and kind of nuanced in subtle ways. So I might look at that play differently. I've wanted to get this game, I'm going to say, back to the table. I don't own this game, but I'd like to play this again. That's Anno 1800 by Martin Wallace. Art by the Fiore group. And this is basically Tech Tree the game. It's set into an industrial theme. It's got some intriguing interactions, and you really have to work with other players to some degree. Or I don't know if with them is the right word, but you have to use some of their things to sometimes build some of your pieces of Tech Tree. It's a very interesting game. I'd really like to try it out again. It's a little sprawling, a lot of pieces, a lot of parts. Setup is probably on the longer end, but it's kind of interesting, and just the way it builds, as you build, it almost feels Civ-like in that you got to build certain things first before you can build more advanced things. So you feel like you're moving up a tech tree as you go through the game. There's some other dynamics to it, not necessarily area control, but some points you gain from some various other sources, and there's a card aspect to the game. But it's interesting. I'd like to try it again. Anno 1800, that is my number 56. Number 55 is a classic. Well, I'm going to call it a classic. Came out in 2017, so I guess it's probably not old enough to call it a classic. This is by Michael Kiesling, with art by Philip Guerin and Chris Williams, and that is Azul. Now I'm kind of grouping all Azuls together with this one, but really when I'm thinking of this, I'm thinking of the basic Azul, the first one. And there's different flavors of Azul. I've tried a few of them, and thus far, I like the base Azul the best. It's just kind of simple, does what it does. It's not the game I want to get out every time, but I kind of consider it somewhat like a filler game. Pretty solid abstract game, a gateway game. It's easy to teach, and even if you're an experienced player, it can be pretty fun to kind of try to figure out what is your best pattern to build, and which tiles do I grab, and how do I more efficiently try to outwit my opponents in what I'm trying to do on my board. So it's I say outwit, that's not the right word. You're not really outwitting opponents, you're just trying to abstractly do better than your opponents. But that's a fun game. Azul at 55, don't see that leaving my collection. As it just seems like one that we can get out fairly regularly and play and have a lot of fun with it. Another game in not too dissimilar a vein, but with a lot more theme on top, is Cascadia at 54 by Randy Flynn and art by Beth Sobel. I think this will be falling into the classic category for years, most likely. It is gateway worthy. It's light enough to teach, but complex enough point scoring system to engage even more experienced gamers. So it's just uniquely designed in such a way that there are a lot of different point options that you can do with it. It does take a minute to kind of get your brain around all the different ways that you can score between similar tiles, to the patterns that the animals are in your preserve. I think that's what it is, a preserve that you're building, and or a habitat. You're building a northeastern habitat. That's what it is. But Cascadia is a pretty solid game that I'd recommend to most people. At 54, this is one that I don't know how much it'll go up or down my list over time. There are sometimes I'm just kind of like, nah, I don't really feel like Cascadia, and there are other times where I'm like, I'd like to play Cascadia. It's Cascadia. But it does seem to be a game that even if I'm not like, that's not the game I'm in the mood for, I'm still okay playing it. And that says something, because some games I feel, it's like, oh, you want to play that again? So I'm afraid this game could fall into that realm, but so could like Azul and Splendor, and I mean, honestly, maybe any game could fall in that round. There's very few that are kind of in the, I'll play that over and over again. And, you know, it doesn't matter how many times you want to play, I will constantly play it. But there you go. That is my 54. 53 is Paladins of the West Kingdom by S.J. McDonald, Shem Phillips, art by Mihaho Dmitrievsky. So this is another Garfield game. I'm thinking I've had a previous Garfield game on here. I think Raiders of Scythia was on here earlier. This is worker placement, but very different than Architects. Architects is sort of that Stone Age type worker placement where you're placing some number of workers in a place, and well, in Architects, one at a time, but as you get more in a singular area, they get more powerful. Paladins, you're placing a combination of worker colors in a certain area to get that particular action for that area. And you got a deck of Paladins that they each turn you're going to draw 3. One's going to be your Paladin for that round. One goes on the bottom of your deck, one goes on the top. So you're going to see the one that goes on the bottom again if it's near the beginning of the game, but later in the game you won't see those. And obviously you have one on top that you could draw in the next round. There's a little bit of interaction. I would say this is largely multiplayer solitaire, but it's fun and I enjoy it. Has a fantastic crunchy solo mode that I enjoy getting out and trying, and usually can play 2 or 3 games in a row and put it away and feel like I had a pretty satisfying experience. It's not one I've ever felt compelled to get expansions for. I feel like the base game itself is good and has room to explore various strategies and ways of engaging the game. But it is fun, it's colorful, it looks good on the table, and it fits in a fairly small box for the amount of game you get in that box. So that is Paladins of the West Kingdom, great worker placement game. Number 52 is another worker placement game. I have been up and down on this game. I sometimes feel like I love it, and other times I'm like, it's lacking. So I just kind of debate back and forth. But this is Dinosaur Island by Jonathan Gilmour and Brian Lewis. Art by Guanchai Moriah and Anthony Wukin. I love the genetic dice. I love the dinosaur theme. It borders sometimes on feeling too light to me, even though there's some decision making to be made. It doesn't feel like it's quite as hard to make those decisions as some other games, or challenging. Like the best option is a little bit more obvious from turn to turn. However, if you have the Totally Liquid expansion, which really is probably what keeps this here around a 52 and not being lower on my list, because it adds some asymmetric abilities or pens and things to the game, and you draft one at the beginning of the game, and then everybody's got that little bit of asymmetry to what they're trying to do, and that makes it better, in my opinion. I also, even though I feel like it takes too long, kind of like the idea of adding a 5th player. I think that's kind of nice, but it is a table hog for sure. Takes up a lot of space on the table. So it's that's probably one of the reasons it's a little tough. I got to get it out, I got to set it up, and for the setup and for the amount of upkeep it takes, it's not as engaging as I would like most games to be. So it sits here around 52. I think if another dinosaur game comes along that I like better, it could very well push this down the list, and that one would take a more prominent place. I haven't been able to try Dinogenics yet, but when I watch playthroughs, to me, Dinogenics looks like a slightly souped up version of Dinosaur Island, or maybe just a different version. It doesn't look like it plays that much differently. And I've looked at things like Apex Predator, and what was the other one? Perseverance could arguably be dinosaur-like, but I don't really have much interest in Perseverance. And I feel like, something species, dominant species, a marine, borders on being one that I might like as well, but I've watched some playthroughs of that, and I'm just not convinced. It's one of those I really need to try to play it. I need to add it to my games I should try out when I go to BGGCon this year and see what I think playing those games in person, because I haven't tried them out yet. And obviously, it'd be nice to have a good dinosaur-themed game. I love the theme. I'm kind of a sucker for it, but it, Dinosaur Island is kind of like, yeah, it's okay. I feel like there's something better out there. So that's my 52. Number 51 is Rococo Deluxe. This is by Matthias Kramer, Stefan Matz, and Louis Maltz, and art by Ian O'Toole. This is the deluxe version that I have of Rococo. The very first time I saw Rococo was back before the deluxe version came out, and I had it on my wish list. I really wanted to play it. It looked really neat. I like the idea of a dressmaking theme. I thought that was creative and out of the box compared to most games. It was like $300, and so I just on my list hoping that one would pop up somewhere, and then they created the deluxe version, which was still kind of expensive for a game, but I got it almost as soon as it came out because I've been looking for it for a couple of years. And I like the deck building mechanism involved in there. The way you draw 3 cards, you have to get through all your cards, but you get to pick which 3 you want each turn. So you kind of have a lot of agency over that deck building, or how you end up utilizing that deck over the course of the game. So it's the components in the deluxe version are very high quality. The art is gorgeous. I kind of like some aspects of the art from the original game better, or at least the box cover. The white box for the deluxe version is a little too white for me, but the game board itself is very nice, and the components are very nice and very well designed. It's not among my favorite games. I used to have this higher on my list, and just over time, it's kind of like, well, it's nice. I like to get it out at least once or twice a year to play, and I can play it. I'm okay playing it most times if somebody suggests Rococo. It's not one that I want to necessarily play more than once in any particular sitting. It also has a very challenging but probably somewhat lucky solo mode that can be pretty tough, but there's a little more luck in there than I like. I need to play it a few more times in the solo mode just to see what I think, if that could be mitigated. But it's a good game. So that is number 51, Rococo. Number 50, also another new game to me this year on BGA, and this is by Greg Deigel and Dennis Lohausen, who did the art, and it is Hawaii. Now, this is pretty much a dry, older worker placement tableau building game. It is fun. It's enjoyable. I like it, but it really needs a facelift. I feel like with a good facelift, I probably I need to play it a few more times before I think there's actually a need for a tweak in the mechanics. This is another one of those games where I played it a couple of times, maybe 2, 3, 4 times, but I didn't read the rules. And so I went back and skimmed some rules, but again, I don't have a physical rule book. But if I saw this at a yard sale or something, I would consider picking it up. It has some interesting action selection options and some interesting tableau building options. Every time I played, I felt like it ended a round too early. So it was pretty, I never quite got my head around the mechanisms that would help me develop my tableau at a better rate than others were doing, but it was fun to play and I enjoyed it. Moving on to number 49, and that is Isle of Cats by Frank West and art by Dragalisco, which is probably a company, and Frank West himself. I have enjoyed this game the more I've played it. I still think sometimes there's a little too much randomness in some of the way the cards play out, and largely that seems to occur to me. There's been a couple of games I played where I would draw cards and I'd say I'd only get a half basket in my card draw. I would take that half basket, so I'm like, well, I need baskets to capture cats. and then I would never see any other basket the rest of the game. I know that happened to me once in a 4-player game. Ended up with just half a basket, and of course I have my permanent basket that I start the game with, but never saw anything else. And it was just like, well, I can't capture cats, which kind of nerfs me. Now, there is some element of the point cards where you can sometimes use that to your advantage if you can get some of those cards that are like, if rats are showing in your boat, then they actually give you a point rather than take away a point. Some things like that, but it is, you're subject to the cards, kind of like maybe like an Arc Nova thing where you just got to see what cards come to you and play to the cards. But that one aspect of Isle of Cats is what gives me a little bit of like, a little luck there. There are more basket cards than other things, and it's only happened to me in a couple of games. But the thing is, like, it's so critical to the game to get enough baskets. At one point, we house ruled. We kind of divided the deck into like a basket and I think it was baskets and lessons, and everything else was in a different deck. And then everybody got to choose, which deck they drew their initial 7 cards from. We've moved on and just kind of shuffled them all together again because I don't think we were using the point cards very effectively when we first started doing that. So I think this needs several playthroughs before we can, think of a creative way to mitigate that basket luck. But I think that is something that kind of needs a little bit of mitigation in this game. But it is fun. The tile laying's fun. The cat pieces are fun. So we enjoy it. All right. Number 48 is Stroganov. Stroganov came out in 2021. The art was beautiful. It looked very fun. I backed it on Kickstarter. Got the game. I like the game. I do enjoy it. I could potentially see this one moving up my list. This is by Andreas Stedding and art by Magic Janik. And I'll say the art is gorgeous. When you lay this game out, it's kind of finicky setting up this game, and the pieces are a little bit finicky, but I kind of enjoy it too. There's some satisfaction to the way everything lays out and how pretty it looks once you get it out on the table. It is fiddly, but with a little bit of tactile pleasantness to how that works to some degree. What's really interesting about this game is there's a sandbox-like economy of horses, coins, and furs. Now the coins are not quite as sandboxy. They are harder to obtain. But with the horses in particular and the furs, there's lots of these little trade mechanisms you can do that are free actions that don't actually take a turn to do. And there's, I think a chunk of this game is learning how to manipulate that economy well, either through gaining horse income or leveraging your furs for the right furs and in creative ways to obtain the other point options in the game. It's largely abstract as far as the goals go. There's very abstract goals toward getting points, either with Tsar cards or collecting tiles, but it is, or song points. That's the other thing. The song track is kind of like, those are the 3 ways you're going to get points. And so you're going to either really push hard on one of those and get tons of points that way, or you're going to try to balance all 3 if you can and get a few points from each one. Haven't played it enough to really feel confident in how good I am at it. I just have seen enough to know you got to leverage that economy well and then use that economy to get the other things that you want in the game. So very interesting game, very pretty game. But that is Stroganov at number 48. Number 47 is a game that I had the luck of playtesting. Got to do several playthroughs and work with the designer, and it actually comes out later this year officially, but I played it on Tabletop Simulator, and that is Halls of Hegra. This is a solo-only game, kind of in the vein of Nemo's War, or Under the Falling Skies, or Coffee Roaster, and this is by Peter Skank Olsen, and art by Jog Brogsen and Jor Fear. It's a little bit of coffee roaster. It's a little bit of Under the Falling Skies. It's got that tough Robinson Crusoe sort of like, man, this is tough to beat. And it also has a little bit of that Nemo's warishness to it. But this is a war game for all intents and purposes. A bag building solo action selection with 3 different stages of the battle that you are working through and doing different things. Largely worker placement, really. But the workers are bag builders, kind of like, what's that game called? Orleans, like Orleans, where you're bag building with your workers. So this is similar to that. And it's tough. I never beat the game. During the course of playtesting, I got close. I got near to it, but I wanted to go back and play this game several times in a row. It was fun. I'd finish a game and I'd be like, I want to play this again. I want to try a different strategy. And it really elicits that desire to get it back, get it set up again, and kind of run it through again, see if you can do a better job using different tactics. So Halls of Hegra is a 2022 comes out. I think technically no one's getting copies of the game till next year, but I don't know, maybe there'll be a demo or something late this year. We'll see. Number 46 is Ethnos. And this is one of those few games that I moved on from. I had it in my collection. I ended up trading it away because it wasn't getting played as much. And as my taste has evolved, I kind of want to get a copy of this again. Now, I've heard a rumor that they might do a reskinning of this or a remake of this. I don't think reskinning. I think it'll be the same factions and everything, but maybe some different art or something. And if they do, I would be interested. It's not necessarily the kind of game that I'd want a souped up version of, like Castles of Burgundy or something like that. But it is a game that I'd love to. I think they could potentially update. It was only in 2017 it came out, so it's not that old. But it's a good game. And if I run across a copy of it somewhere, I will probably re-add this to my collection again because it's got some good variability with the set collection and the different factions. And you only use, like, I think 6 factions in each game, maybe 5. And the area control is kind of an interesting dynamic with each faction being a little bit different in how they get that control. But Ethnos is a fantastic game and makes my number 46. Number 45 is probably a lesser known game here in the States. Might be more well known over in Europe, and that is Masters of the Night by Nikolai Aslamov and art by Antoine Kvasvarov and Irina Pachanikina. This is published by Ares Games. So Ares, again, I think I had another Ares game on here somewhere. They don't really market over here too much, and it is a co-op game. I played this last year at actually demoed this game last year at BGG-Con, and it was fun. It's just these, I think it was 9 tiles that a couple of them you have to place in certain areas, but all the rest get shuffled and randomly placed out, and so it makes this grid, and you're a family of vampires, and each vampire in the family has very different powers. And you wake up after a 10,000-year slumber, and you have to go feed on the people of the city. And then there's these these spies that kind of know that vampires exist, and they're looking for vampires, but they don't know that your family's in the city. But the more people and how you kill people raises their awareness. So if awareness reaches a certain point, you lose the game. And people can also kill you as a vampire, and if your health reaches 0 and you don't have a way to recover, you can lose the game that way too. So fairly challenging. You really have to work together. Easier and lighter to play than, say, Spirit Island as a co-op. But some good variability that you're not usually, I don't think you would ever play with all 5. I don't know how many family members there were. I can't remember how many family members there were, but we never played with them all at once. It might be a 5-player game, and maybe you could, because it escalates based on the enemies escalate based on the number of players. But that's Masters of the Night. by Nikolai Aslamov, and I hope to actually, I don't know that I will own that game, but I hope to play this with a friend in the near future and get to try this one out again, because it was fun. Number 44 is a game that is bordering on becoming a classic game. I don't know that it's quite there, but it's getting close, and that is the Castles of Mad King Ludwig by Ted Alspach, with art by Keith Curtis, Agnesia Debrazwika, and Olin Tim. It might not be quite old enough to be a classic, but I hear it come up a few more times in conversations. This is one of the first games I had in my collection that was a modern board game. The first time I saw it, I thought that looks really cool, and somebody gifted it to me several years ago, and I've enjoyed it. I upgraded the box, added I think a broken token insert, and allows me to put the tiles in there. Makes it a lot easier getting out and setting up, which this game desperately needs. If you have plastic bags for this game, it takes a long time to set up. But it is very enjoyable, sort of I don't know if point salad's the right word, but you're building a castle. And it has this really interesting auction mechanic in the game where at the beginning of every round, the start player sets up these tiles, up to 6 of them, depending on the player count, and they set the prices on the tiles from lowest to highest. And then other players, as they go around, they're going to grab tiles on their turn and pay whoever the first player is. So that's how you get money back in the game, largely, is by setting good auction prices, because you want to set them not so low that you get so little money, especially for things that people are really after, but trying to put those really low, either tiles that people can't get or they don't really want, put them on the cheaper end. Somewhere in the middle, kind of get those tiles players are after, and then at the top, maybe the one that you're trying to save for yourself, or one you just want to keep out of reach of people, because if they're gonna get that many points off of it, they're gonna have to pay top dollar. So it's a very interesting dynamic to that game, and it's fun building the castle and trying to assemble something that's going to score you a lot of points. So that is the Castles of Mad King Ludwig that came out in 2014. Number 43 is Trismegistus. I classify this as one of the T games because Daniel Tassini is one of the designers, as well as Federico Pierlorenzi, and it's got art by Paul Nizoilek and Paulina Walk. This is a tough game for me to place. Sometimes I feel like it should be lower on my list, and there are other times where I might bump it up just slightly. It is the art is not that good. The quality is kind of like interesting, up and down, weird component quality mixture. I actually did a 3D print to store this game, and so it feels a lot better than the base game really is. It's got mixtures of kind of ugly Euro with some pieces that feel a little better. The art on the cards is just it could be so much better, and it would be easily a game that if it was reskinned would definitely, probably more people would like it and want to engage it. But it's what makes the game more unique and interesting than it normally probably would be is if you play well, then you leverage the mechanisms in such a way that you will most likely end up with this one turn, if not maybe two, where you do this massive, I'm pulling this lever, I'm pulling this lever, and this lever, and this lever, and this lever, and this does this, and this does that, and I get all these things, and now I can do these things. And you can just have this huge one-off turn that is just, wow, that was immensely satisfying. And thematically, when you think about, I'm an alchemist, I'm trying to get all these things to work, it's like the big alchemy thing that you get to happen, which won't necessarily get your master experiment done. It could not, but it feels like you just achieved a master potion in your alchemy when you do that. So It's not, in some ways I feel like the game could be classified as maybe a little too easy, because at least in the games I've played, getting the ultimate formula completed is not that hard if you know what you're doing. It seems like everybody can do it, but I don't, I've not played a game where all players of equal experience have sat around the table and played, and so that might change the dynamic quite a bit if you have lots of players competing for very similar things. So that is Trismegistus. I think it kind of flew under the radar when it came out, and I didn't realize it came out in 2019. I thought it was slightly older than that. So somebody left it at one of our local shops as a used game, and I picked it up there. I can't even remember if it was it might have been unopened when I got it. And last two games here, moving on. Number 42 is a game I played with my brother some time ago. He owns this game. Well, actually, I own this game now. Where'd I get it? I think I picked it up at some local place or I traded for it. And that is Res Arcana by Thomas Lehman with art by Julian Delville. And this game this is another game that I didn't realize it was 2019. It seems like it should be older than that. But it feels a little Magic the Gathering-esque. That is how I describe it. It is a race for points, basically, using sort of a tableau deck building action selection group of mechanisms. But it's fun. It's light. I think it's a filler game. Yeah, okay, maybe it's not a filler game. It's not really a filler game. It borders right there on the edge. I could see this game being a filler game if it started to be played with people who all know what they're doing. You know all the cards, you know all the mechanics, you're real solid with all of those things, and you could probably play this game in about 45 minutes, I think. So it's not a hard game to learn. There's just enough mechanics there to kind of I gotta get my head around it, but it is largely a race for points using sort of, I describe it as Magic-esque feeling. Ever since I played the game, I was like, oh, it's kind of like if Magic the Gathering was a board game, sort of. Not 100%, but just a little bit has that flavor to it. So that is my number 42, Res Arcana. Number 41 is a game that I honestly thought I had it lower on the list. I'm glad it's not lower. I just thought I had it lower, but I think I'm confusing it with my 2014 top 10 list because it is Istanbul, which came out in 2014. I did get a chance to play this get this to the table on a game day and try it out with some fairly good gamers, and it was a blast. This is a great game by Rudiger Dorn, Andreas Resch, Hans-Georg Schneider. Those are the artists, and it's an abstract worker placement action selection game where you're racing to be the first to get 10 gems. That's what you're ultimately trying to do, and whoever has the most gems at the end of the game will win the game, but 10 is what is the end game trigger. And it requires a tight management of your resources and moving across these tiles, which is kind of like a process of I got to move my guy and I got to drop off assistants as I go or pick them up. If I ever land on a tile and I can't drop off or pick up an assistant, then that's the end of my turn. I'm done. So you really want to manage your turns such that doesn't happen for sure. And you're constantly just trying to build up certain resources to gather what you need to often purchase gems on a few of the tiles that are available. And then there's a few tiles where you get to kind of gamble, roll dice and see how much you get. And you always get a little something. So it's not like you're gonna come out with nothing, but it's a really interesting game that seems 2014 a little bit ahead of its time. It probably, I don't think the art is bad, but it was very similar to lots of games that had art that kind of looked like that, and I think that people aren't going to necessarily chase after it because of the art. Now, when I did my top 10 for 2014, this one kind of stuck out because it was slightly better than a lot of other games that came out that year art-wise. It seemed to pop just slightly more, just a little bit less of those beige and dull colors that you saw in a lot of Euros, and that helped this one. But the game mechanics are solid. It's a fun game. It is, I would call, generally a filler game, but a little bit more challenging decision-making process than even something like, say, Splendor, which is a fine filler game, but this one felt a little crunchier. So that is Istanbul at number 41. And that is my number 60 through 41 of my top 100. If you have watched this far into the series, then I hope it has been enjoyable, and I'd love to hear your comments. What do you think about these games? Are they in your top 100? If you've ever thought about a top 100, or are they among some of the games that you like the most? What might you add if you have seen everything up to this point, up to 41, from 100 to 41? Then, you know, is there something here that you feel like you would have added in that would have been in that range for you? Obviously, there are still 40 more games to go, so, you know, some of those games could show up there. But if you have been with me this far, thank you for joining. Until the next grouping of games from Unraveled Game Thoughts, have a great day.